The universe had one rule: don't awaken the humanity. The galaxy broke it. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 miles of gleaming metal and crystal. Thousands of alien beings filled the massive space, their voices creating a low hum that echoed off the curved walls. Ships from hundreds of worlds floated outside the station's windows, their lights twinkling like stars against the dark void of space. Elder Vorthek stood at the center of the hall, his crystal body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the floor. He was old, even by the standards of his people. His species had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. Today he carried the weight of ancient knowledge that few beings in the galaxy still remembered. In his translucent hands, he held the Codex Universalis. The book was older than most star systems, written in languages that had died before many species had learned to make fire. Its pages contained the fundamental laws that kept the galaxy peaceful and stable, laws that had been tested by time and proven necessary through blood and suffering. Fellow beings of the Council, Vorthak's voice rang out, translated instantly into thousands of languages. We gather today to discuss a proposal that threatens the very foundation of our civilization. Commodore Zeklis requests that we lift the quarantine around the Sol system. A wave of whispers swept through the hall. Many of the younger species had never heard of Sol. They knew only that it was a forbidden zone, a place their ships were ordered to avoid. But the older races remembered. They had been there when the rule was written. Commodore Zeklis rose from his seat in the Andromedian section. He was tall and blue-skinned, with the confident bearing of someone who had never known real fear. His merchant fleets were among the largest in the galaxy, bringing wealth and trade to hundreds of worlds. But today his eyes showed only greed. Honorable Council, Zeklis began, his voice smooth and persuasive. The Sol quarantine is a relic of the past. My trade routes are forced to travel an extra 50 light-years around this so-called forbidden zone. This costs my fleet's time and fuel. It costs the galaxy prosperity and growth. Vorthak's crystal form darkened with worry. Commodore, you do not understand what you ask. The quarantine exists for reasons beyond your profits. Then enlighten us, Elder, Zeklis challenged. What could be so dangerous about a single star system? My scouts report that the third planet contains only primitive life. They have not even achieved faster than light travel. Their technology is thousands of years behind our own. Vorthak opened the ancient book with careful reverence. The pages seemed to glow with their own inner light. The first law, written in the blood of 17 fallen empires, states clearly, let the third planet of Sol remain in slumber, for its awakening heralds the end of order. Myths and legends, Zeklis scoffed. Old stories meant to frighten children. I have studied their broadcasts. They call themselves humans. They fight among themselves with crude weapons. They barely understand their own planet, let alone the galaxy. An ancient voice spoke from the shadows of the hall. Keeper Morthak, one of the few beings older than Vorthak himself, stepped into the light. His species resembled massive insects with compound eyes that could see across multiple dimensions of time. Young Commodore, Morthak's voice clicked and buzzed. You speak of things you do not comprehend. I was present during the last awakening. 65 million of their years ago we made contact with the humans. The hall fell silent. Even the most skeptical beings leaned forward to listen. They were different then, Morthak continued. More primitive in some ways, more advanced in others. We thought them simple creatures easy to guide and control. We were wrong. What happened? Asked Representative Thylix of the Vegan Confederacy. Morthak's compound eyes seemed to look beyond the present moment, seeing into the distant past. They adapted, faster than any species we had ever encountered. Within a single generation, they had reverse-engineered our technology. Within 2 generations, they had improved upon it. Within 3 generations, they had spread across 17 star systems. But surely, Zeklis interrupted, a single species could not threaten the entire galaxy. It was not their technology that made them dangerous, Vorthak said softly. It was their nature. Humans do not simply adopt new ideas. They transform them. They find uses and applications that the original creators never imagined. They take what exists and make it better, faster, more efficient. Morthak nodded agreement. More than that, they never stopped moving. Other species reach a comfortable level of advancement and remain there for millennia. Not humans. For them, today's impossible dream becomes tomorrow's starting point. But they were stopped, Zeklis pressed. The ancient records speak of their defeat. Not defeat, Vorthak corrected. Negotiation. The humans agreed to return to their world and remain there. In exchange, we agreed to leave them alone. The quarantine was not imposed upon them. It was requested by them. Why would they accept such isolation? Asked Chancellor Vex from the Stellar Republic. Because, Vorthak said quietly, they told us they were not ready yet. A chill ran through the assembled beings. The implications of those words hung in the air like a threatening storm. Commodore Zeklis, however, remained unconvinced. That was 65 million years ago. Surely they have not remained static all this time. If they possessed such potential, where are their fleets? Where are their colonies? Our sensors detect nothing but primitive radio signals from their world. Perhaps, Vorthak said. That is exactly what they want us to detect. Despite the warnings, greed and impatience won the day. The vote was called, and species after species cast their decision. The younger races, those who had never known the terror of the ancient days, voted to lift the quarantine. The profit and convenience promised by opening the Sol system outweighed the warnings of creatures they considered overly cautious. When the final tally was announced, the quarantine was lifted by a single vote, 847 to 846. Vorthak closed the ancient book with trembling hands. May the universe forgive us for what we have done this day. Commodore Zeklis smiled with satisfaction. Elder, you worry too much. What harm could come from saying hello to a species that has never left their own star system? As the council session ended and beings began to file out of the Great Hall, Vorthak remained behind. He stared out at the stars, wondering if somewhere among them, on a small blue-green world circling an unremarkable yellow star, sensors were already detecting the council's decision. He wondered if the humans were pleased that the galaxy had finally chosen to wake them up. Deep in the archives beneath the council station, automated systems began shutting down the gravitational dampeners that had hidden Earth for millennia. Cloaking fields that had operated longer than most civilizations had existed powered down one by one. For the first time in 65 million years, the Sol system became visible to the galaxy, and in that system, on the third planet from the Sun, ancient protocols activated. Signals raced around the globe at the speed of light, reaching installations hidden beneath mountains and oceans. Deep space monitoring stations that had pretended to be dormant for millennia suddenly came alive. Humanity had been waiting for this day for a very long time. The universe had one rule: don't awaken the humanity. The galaxy broke. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's fateful vote. Commodore Zeklis stood on the bridge of his scout ship, the Prophet's Edge, as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The journey had been routine, following standard first contact protocols that had been refined over millions of years. Captain Thrix, a veteran Saurian explorer with scales that had been darkened by radiation from 100 different stars, studied the sensor readings with professional interest. His reptilian eyes tracked the data streams flowing across his console. Readings confirm previous reports, sir, Thrix reported. Single star, 8 planets, primitive life on the third world. Radio signals indicate early industrial civilization. Good, Zeklis nodded, his blue skin gleaming under the bridge lights. Begin standard first contact sequence. Mathematical progressions first, then peaceful intentions broadcast. The crew went about their work with practiced efficiency. The Saurians handled navigation and sensors while the insectoid Vex managed communications. This was their 40th first contact mission. They knew exactly what to expect. Lieutenant Zix, a young Vex whose compound eyes could process data faster than most computers, began intercepting human radio signals. The strange sounds and images that came through the receivers made the crew laugh with amusement. Look at this, Zix clicked in the Vex language. They broadcast entertainment to each other through electromagnetic waves. So primitive they have not learned to filter their communications. What kind of entertainment? Asked Ensign Krath, a Saurian female who specialized in xenocultural analysis. Moving pictures with sound, simple stories about their daily lives, and something they call news, where they inform their population about local events. Zix paused, studying the data more carefully. Interesting. They appear to be a warlike species. Much of their entertainment involves conflict. Captain Thrix had seen this pattern before. Most primitive species went through a violent phase before achieving space travel. Keep monitoring. We need to understand their culture before making direct contact. The mathematical signals went out as planned. Prime numbers, basic equations, geometric progressions, the universal language of logic that had worked with every species they had ever encountered. Usually, it took days or weeks for a primitive civilization to recognize the artificial nature of the signals and begin responding. The humans responded in 4 hours. Sir, Lieutenant Zix's voice carried a note of surprise. They are transmitting back to us. Perfect mathematical responses, but also something else. What kind of something else? Thrix asked. Music, sir. They are sending us music along with the mathematics. Commodore Zeklis frowned. In all his years of first contact, no species had ever responded with art before establishing basic communication. Play it. The bridge filled with strange harmonies, complex melodies that seemed to carry emotion as well as information. The crew listened in fascination as human voices sang in languages they did not recognize. There is a pattern in the music, Zix reported after several minutes of analysis. Hidden mathematical sequences, but also, sir, I think they are showing us their planet. The main screen activated, displaying the signals in visual form. The humans had embedded images in their response. Pictures of their blue-green world, their cities, their people, but also star charts, maps of their solar system that were far more accurate than they should have been. How do they know the orbital mechanics of their outer planets? Ensign Krath wondered aloud. Our scans showed they have only just begun exploring their own space. Captain Thrix felt the first stirring of unease. Something was not quite right about this first contact. The humans were responding too quickly, too precisely, almost as if they had been expecting contact. Sir? Zix interrupted his thoughts. They are requesting a meeting. Already? We have not even established basic language protocols. They transmitted the request in 17 different languages, sir, including 3 that match known galactic languages. The bridge fell silent. No isolated species should know galactic languages. It was impossible. Which languages? Commodore Zeklis demanded. Saurian Common, Vex Primary, and... Sir, they used formal Andromedan diplomatic speech. Perfect grammar and syntax. Zeklis felt his blue skin grow pale. Formal Andromedan diplomatic speech was not taught to outsiders. It was used only for the most sensitive negotiations between galactic powers. What are their proposed meeting coordinates? Captain Thrix asked quietly. Spatial coordinates between their world and their moon. They suggest a neutral location in open space. Do they have the capability to reach those coordinates? Krath asked. Before anyone could answer, new signals appeared on the sensors. Ships were rising from the surface of Earth. Not the primitive chemical rockets they had been monitoring, but sleek vessels that moved with purpose and technology. Sir, Zix's voice was barely a whisper. Those ships are using gravitational manipulation drives. Gravitational drives were advanced technology that most species did not develop until centuries after achieving spaceflight. The humans appeared to have skipped several thousand years of normal development. How many ships? Thrix asked. 47 vessels confirmed, sir. More may be cloaked. The word cloaked hung in the air like a threat. Cloaking technology was even more advanced than gravitational drives. Captain Thrix made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Accept their meeting request, but maintain full defensive posture. 2 days later, the Prophet's Edge arrived at the specified coordinates. Empty space stretched in all directions with Earth's moon hanging like a gray sentinel in the distance. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to shimmer and a human vessel materialized out of nowhere. The ship was beautiful in a way that took Thrix's breath away. Smooth curves that suggested both strength and grace. Hull materials that seemed to drink in starlight and reflect it back in subtle patterns. It was larger than the Prophet's Edge but moved with the fluid precision of a much smaller craft. Incoming communication, sir, Zix reported. They are requesting permission to come aboard. Sir, Ensign Krath interrupted. Their ship design. It incorporates design principles from at least 6 different galactic civilizations, but integrated in ways I have never seen before. Commodore Zeklis stared at the human vessel and felt the weight of ancient warnings pressing down on him. Grant permission. But keep weapons ready. The human delegation arrived in an elegant shuttle that docked with their ship as smoothly as if the 2 vessels had been designed to work together. 3 humans walked through the airlock, and Captain Thrix got his first close look at the species that had remained hidden for so long. They were smaller than most galactic species, but they moved with a confidence that filled the room. Their leader, a female with silver hair and intelligent brown eyes, stepped forward with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "Captain Thrix," she said in perfect Saurian, "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Coalition. Thank you for accepting our invitation. How do you know my name?" Thrix asked carefully. "We have been monitoring your communications since you entered our system," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Standard defensive protocols. I hope you understand." "Defensive protocols?" Commodore Zeklis stepped forward. "You speak as if you were expecting us." Admiral Chen's smile widened. "Commodore Zeklis of the Andromedian Trade Federation. We have been expecting someone like you for quite some time, though I must admit we thought contact would come much sooner." "How long have you known about galactic civilization?" Thrix asked. Chen exchanged glances with her companions. "Captain, how long have your people been observing our world?" "That information is classified. Approximately 65 million years," Chen said calmly. "Give or take a few millennia. We have been listening to your communications for most of that time. Did you really think we could not detect your observation posts?" The silence that followed was deafening. Everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. The primitive species they had expected to encounter had been watching them for longer than most civilizations had existed. "What do you want from us?" Zeklis finally managed to ask. Admiral Chen's expression became serious. "Nothing you are not willing to give, Commodore. But now that contact has been made, we would very much like to begin formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. And if the Council refuses," Chen's smile returned, but this time it carried a different quality. "Oh, I do not think that will be a problem. We have prepared extensive proposals for mutually beneficial relationships. I think you will find our offer quite compelling." As the meeting continued, Captain Thrix realized that everything had changed. The humans had not been contacted by the galaxy. The galaxy had been contacted by humanity, and from the confidence in Admiral Chen's voice, they had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The universe had one rule: don't awaken the humanity. The galaxy broke. At the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 3 weeks after first contact with humanity. Elder Vorthak stood once again in the Great Hall, but this time his crystal form seemed dimmer, as if the light within him was fading from worry and exhaustion. Reports had been flooding in from across the galaxy, each one more disturbing than the last. Humanity had not simply responded to first contact. They had exploded across known space like a virus, appearing simultaneously in dozens of star systems without warning or explanation. "Fellow council members," Vorthak began, his voice heavy with the weight of prophecy fulfilled, "we face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of galactic civilization. The humans have not merely joined our community, they have begun to reshape it." Representative Thylix of the Vegan Confederacy stood to address the assembly. Her people were traders and diplomats skilled in the art of negotiation. But even her composed demeanor showed cracks of strain. 3 days ago, she reported, human diplomatic vessels appeared in the Vega system. They requested formal meetings with our government. When we asked how they had traveled so far so quickly, they simply smiled and said they had been preparing for this conversation for a long time. Murmurs of unease rippled through the hall. The Vega system was over 300 light-years from Earth. Even with the fastest hyperdrive technology, such a journey should have taken months. Chancellor Mortius of the Rigel Republic spoke next. His species resembled large, intelligent cephalopods, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of careful diplomacy. "The humans did not simply request meetings with us. They arrived knowing our political structure, our trade agreements, our military capabilities. They spoke our language not just fluently, but with proper dialectal variations for each of our colony worlds." "How is that possible?" demanded Admiral Korvax of the Stellar Defense Force. "No species achieves that level of linguistic sophistication without decades of study." "That is not the most disturbing part," Mortius continued. "They presented us with detailed proposals for improving our agricultural efficiency, upgrading our transportation networks, and resolving 3 separate territorial disputes that we thought were completely confidential." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Confidential territorial disputes were exactly that, confidential. The idea that an unknown species could possess such detailed intelligence was terrifying. Speaker Voss of the Centauri Alliance stood with obvious reluctance. His people were proud warriors who had never backed down from any challenge. Today he looked defeated. The humans approached us as well, he admitted. But they did not come seeking alliance or trade agreements. They came with warnings. What kind of warnings? Forthak asked. They informed us that our military deployment in the beta sector was strategically unsound. They provided detailed analysis of our defensive weaknesses and suggested improvements. When our generals protested that such information was classified at the highest levels, the human ambassador produced complete tactical assessments of our fleet positions, supply lines, and communication protocols. The silence that followed was absolute. Military intelligence of that quality could only be obtained through years of careful espionage or technological superiority that bordered on the impossible. Commodore Zeklis, who had started this crisis with his vote to lift the quarantine, finally spoke. His blue skin had taken on a sickly pale hue, and his usual confidence was nowhere to be seen. My trade fleets have encountered human vessels on 17 different trade routes, he said quietly. They are not intercepting our shipments or interfering with our business. They are offering alternatives. What kind of alternatives? Asked Trade Minister Flux of the Commercial Syndicate. Better ones, Zeklis replied with hollow resignation. Faster shipping, lower costs, higher quality goods. They have somehow established manufacturing and distribution networks that make our operations look primitive by comparison. Representative Thylix leaned forward with interest. How are they achieving such efficiency? We do not know, Zeklis admitted. Their ships appear to be using technologies we do not recognize. Their factories exist on worlds that our surveys had classified as uninhabitable. When we asked them how they had established such extensive operations so quickly, they said they had been preparing infrastructure for anticipated future growth. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not simply hidden their technological capabilities. They had been secretly building a galactic-scale industrial base while the rest of the galaxy believed them to be a primitive, isolated species. A new voice cut through the worried discussions. President Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Coalition appeared on the main communication screen, her image transmitted through quantum entanglement technology that should have taken decades for humans to develop. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice calm and respectful, but carrying an undertone of absolute confidence. I hope this emergency session is not a result of concerns about human expansion. We have been very careful to follow all established protocols for interspecies contact. Elder Vorthak stepped forward. President Vasquez, we are concerned about the speed and scope of human activities. You have contacted dozens of species simultaneously and established operations across hundreds of light years in a matter of weeks. I understand your surprise, Vasquez replied with a slight smile. But you must realize that we have had considerable time to prepare for this moment. 65 million years is quite sufficient for advanced planning. You have been actively preparing for galactic contact for 65 million years? Asked Chancellor Mortius incredulously. Not actively, no, Vasquez corrected. We agreed to remain isolated until such time as the galaxy chose to make contact with us. But we did not agree to remain ignorant. We have been observing, learning, and preparing for the inevitable day when isolation would end. Your expansion violates established territorial boundaries, Admiral Korvax protested. The systems you claim are already inhabited by other species. Admiral, I think you will find that our territorial claims are quite legitimate, Vasquez replied calmly. The Sol Accords, which we drafted approximately 3,000 years ago, outline our projected expansion requirements based on population growth and resource needs. These documents have been legally filed with the appropriate galactic authorities. The council members looked at each other in confusion. No one remembered receiving any documents from humanity. Furthermore, Vasquez continued, we have been extremely generous in our proposals. Current inhabitants of systems within our claimed territory are being offered comprehensive relocation packages, including improved worlds, advanced technology, and favorable trade agreements. And if they refuse to relocate? Forthak asked quietly. Then we will work together to find mutually acceptable solutions. Vasquez replied smoothly. Humanity values cooperation and peaceful resolution of conflicts. We have no desire to displace anyone who does not wish to be displaced. But you do intend to expand into those systems regardless, Admiral Korvax stated. Of course, Vasquez said matter-of-factly. Those systems contain resources necessary for human development. We have been planning their utilization for millennia. However, we believe that cooperation and shared prosperity are preferable to conflict. Speaker Voss leaned forward aggressively. And what if the current inhabitants view your expansion as an invasion? President Vasquez's expression grew slightly cooler. Speaker Voss, we would deeply regret any misunderstanding that led to violence. However, I should point out that in the past 3 weeks, 17 separate rebellions have begun against existing governments across the galaxy. In each case, the rebel forces have requested humanitarian assistance from Earth. The hall erupted in chaos. Representatives began shouting questions and accusations simultaneously. How had humans made contact with rebel groups? How had they coordinated simultaneous uprisings across vast distances? What kind of assistance were they providing? Vasquez waited patiently for the noise to subside before continuing. We have been monitoring galactic communications for a considerable time. It has come to our attention that many populations are dissatisfied with their current governmental arrangements. As advocates for freedom and self-determination, we feel obligated to support those who seek positive change. You are destabilizing the entire galaxy. Vorthak accused. We are offering alternatives, Vasquez corrected. Better alternatives. The choice of whether to accept them remains with each individual species and world. The communication ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. They had awakened humanity expecting to deal with a primitive species seeking guidance and protection. Instead, they found themselves facing a civilization that had spent millions of years preparing to reshape the galaxy according to their own vision. Elder Vorthak looked around the great hall, seeing fear and uncertainty in every face. The ancient warning had been clear, but no one had truly understood what it meant. Humanity's awakening did not herald the end of order through destruction. It heralded the end of order through transformation. The galaxy would never be the same again. The universe had one rule: don't awaken the humanity. The galaxy broke it. For the first time in galactic history, the 3 greatest military powers put aside their ancient rivalries and formed an alliance. The Andromedian Trade Federation, the Crystalline Hegemony, and the Void Syndicate had been enemies for millions of years. Today, they stood united against a common threat. Fleet Admiral Gorthak of the Crystalline Hegemony commanded the largest military force ever assembled. His flagship, the mountain-sized dreadnought Eternal Vigilance, led a fleet of over 50,000 vessels. Behind him flew the combined might of 3 civilizations, representing the military power of half the galaxy. All fleet commanders, Gorthak's voice echoed across the vast communication network, remember that we face an unknown enemy. The humans have shown technological capabilities that should not exist. Maintain formation discipline and follow engagement protocols precisely. Admiral Zenth of the Andromedian forces acknowledged from her position commanding the right flank. Her blue-skinned people had perfected space combat over millions of years. Our scouts report no human presence beyond the Sol system's outer boundary. They appear to be concentrated around their homeworld. Good, replied Admiral Corvus of the Void Syndicate. His people were void dwellers, born in the cold darkness between stars. If anyone could detect hidden threats in space, it would be them. Our sensors show only primitive defensive installations, orbital platforms using basic weapon systems. Gorthak studied the tactical displays with professional interest. The human defenses looked exactly like what he would expect from a species that had never fought a real war. Simple energy weapons, basic shields, standard orbital positioning, nothing that posed a serious threat to his overwhelming force. Perhaps the human's reputation has been exaggerated, suggested General Thyron, Gorthak's second-in-command. Fear often makes threats seem larger than they actually are. The Allied fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, expecting to face a handful of desperate human vessels. Instead, they found something that made even the most experienced commanders pause in confusion. The space around Earth's solar system was filled with structures that had not been there during previous reconnaissance missions. Thousands of platforms, weapon emplacements, and defensive installations formed a complex network throughout the entire system. Asteroids had been hollowed out and converted into fortress stations. The orbit of every planet contained military installations that hummed with unknown energy signatures. How did they build all of this so quickly? Admiral Zenth whispered, staring at the sensor readings in disbelief. They did not build it quickly. Admiral Corvus replied grimly. Look at the construction signatures. Some of these installations show weathering consistent with centuries of operation. That is impossible, Gorthak protested. Our observation posts would have detected such massive construction projects. Unless, Corvus said quietly, they built everything while cloaked. The implications hit the fleet commanders like a physical blow. Cloaking technology that could hide massive construction projects for centuries was beyond anything in the galactic arsenal. It suggested a level of technological sophistication that made their own achievements look primitive. A communication request came from the human fleet that emerged to meet them. The vessels were smaller than the galactic dreadnoughts but moved with fluid precision that was almost artistic. They positioned themselves with perfect coordination, creating defensive formations that seemed to flow like water rather than rigid military structures. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. The transmission began. Welcome to the Sol system, Fleet Admiral Gorthak. We regret the necessity of meeting under these circumstances. Admiral Chen, Gorthak replied formally. I am authorized by the Galactic Alliance to demand that humanity cease all expansion activities and submit to Council authority. I am afraid that is not acceptable. Admiral, Chen's voice remained calm and professional. Humanity has legitimate territorial claims and defensive needs that cannot be compromised. However, we remain committed to resolving the situation through peaceful means if possible. You are outnumbered 50,000 to 1. General Thyron interjected. Surrender now and your people will be treated with dignity. There was a pause before Chen responded, and when she did, her voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement. General, I appreciate your concern for human dignity. However, I think you may have misunderstood our defensive capabilities. The human fleet began to move, and the galactic commanders watched in growing alarm as their formations demonstrated impossible maneuverability. Ships changed direction without visible thrust, accelerated beyond theoretical limits, and coordinated their movements with precision that suggested a level of communication and control beyond anything they had encountered. How are they moving like that? Admiral Zenth demanded, staring at her tactical displays. Those maneuvers violate basic physics. Their propulsion systems are unlike anything in our databases, her science officer reported. They appear to be manipulating space-time itself rather than using conventional thrust. The battle began when Admiral Corvus, growing frustrated with the display of human technology, ordered his forward scouts to probe the defensive perimeter. The moment his ships crossed the boundary into the inner system, the human response was swift and devastating. Weapons fired from positions that had seemed empty moments before. Energy beams struck with surgical precision, targeting command centers and critical systems while avoiding life support. The attacking vessels found themselves disabled rather than destroyed, their crews unharmed but their ships powerless. They are not trying to kill us, Admiral Zenth observed with surprise. Every shot is precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel again. Fleet Admiral Gorthak, please understand that we have no desire to harm your crews. However, we will defend our territory with whatever force is necessary. Gorthak ordered a full assault, sending wave after wave of ships against the human defenses. Each attack was met with the same result. Human vessels moved like dancers through space, avoiding incoming fire with graceful precision, while their return shots found targets with impossible accuracy. The galactic fleet found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Battle tactics that had been refined over millions of years were anticipated and countered. Formations that had never been defeated were systematically dismantled by an opponent who fought as if they had studied galactic military doctrine for centuries. They know our strategies, Admiral Corvus reported grimly. Every formation we deploy, every tactic we employ, they have already prepared countermeasures. How is that possible? Gorthak demanded. Because we have been studying your military doctrine for 3,000 years. Admiral Chen's voice cut through their communications. Fleet Admiral, your people have been broadcasting your training exercises, tactical discussions, and strategic planning across subspace for millennia. Did you think we were not listening? The truth hit the galactic commanders like a physical blow. Humanity had not simply hidden their technology and capabilities. They had been systematically studying every aspect of galactic civilization. learning from their enemy's own communications and preparing responses to every possible scenario. You have been preparing for this specific battle. Gorthak realized. We have been preparing for every possible battle, Chen corrected. This is merely one of 17,000 scenarios we have analyzed and developed responses for. The engagement continued for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human defensive network proved impenetrable, while their mobile forces moved through the galactic fleet like surgeons, systematically disabling ship after ship with minimal casualties. When it was over, Admiral Gorthak found himself aboard his flagship, surrounded by dead consoles and disabled systems. His fleet, the pride of 3 civilizations, hung powerless in space. Yet his crew was alive, breathing recycled air and drinking emergency rations that had been delivered by human supply drones. Admiral Chen appeared on his main screen, her expression showing genuine regret. Fleet Admiral, I want you to know that we take no pleasure in this outcome. Your crews will be provided with everything they need while repairs are made to your vessels. How did you achieve such rapid advancement? Gorthak asked quietly. Rapid? Chen looked genuinely puzzled. Admiral, we have been preparing for this conversation for over 3,000 years. We did not achieve rapid advancement. We achieved patient, methodical development over an extended period of time. But your technology surpasses anything in the galaxy. Our technology represents the accumulated knowledge of thousands of years of careful study and preparation, Chen corrected. We simply needed the galaxy to make the first move so we could demonstrate what we had learned. As repair drones swarmed over the disabled galactic vessels, Admiral Gorthak realized the full scope of humanity's deception. They had not been sleeping for 65 million years. They had been studying, planning, and preparing for the day when the galaxy would force them to reveal their true capabilities. The universe had one rule: don't awaken the humanity. The galaxy broke its 6 months after first contact. The galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The ancient star maps that had guided civilization for millions of years were now obsolete. Trade routes that had operated for millennia had been replaced by human alternatives that offered faster transit and lower costs. Governments that had ruled for eons found themselves facing populations that demanded the prosperity and freedom they saw other worlds achieving under human guidance. The Galactic Council no longer existed. The Great Hall where representatives from thousands of worlds had once gathered stood empty, its crystal walls reflecting only darkness. 12 major species had declared independence from the old order and requested protection from the United Earth Coalition. The remaining governments found themselves isolated and increasingly irrelevant. Elder Vorthak walked through the abandoned corridors of the council station, his crystal form dim with age and sorrow. He was one of the few beings old enough to remember the warnings in the ancient texts, and one of the fewer still who understood what they had truly meant. His footsteps echoed through empty chambers where decisions affecting trillions of lives had once been made. Now those chambers hosted only silence and the memories of a civilization that had ended not with violence, but with simple irrelevance. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. President Elena Vasquez appeared on a wall screen, her expression respectful but firm. Elder Vorthak, she said gently, I hope you are well. I understand that recent changes have been difficult for those who remember the old ways. President Vasquez, Vorthak replied wearily, I have come to understand that resistance is futile. Your people have achieved something that was thought impossible. You have conquered the galaxy without firing a shot in anger. We have not conquered anything, Vasquez corrected softly. We have simply offered alternatives. Better alternatives. The choice to accept them has always remained with each individual species and world. But the choices you offer make resistance impossible, Vorthak observed. How does one argue against prosperity? How does one defend systems that cause suffering when you demonstrate systems that eliminate it? Vasquez nodded with understanding. That was always our strategy, Elder. We learned long ago that the most effective way to defeat an enemy is to make them irrelevant. Why destroy governments when you can simply offer their people something better? The Zephyrian Council dissolved yesterday, Vorthak reported quietly. My people have voted to join the Earth Coalition. We are among the last to make this choice. And how do you feel about that decision? Vorthak considered the question carefully. His species had guided galactic civilization for millions of years, serving as wise counselors and keepers of ancient knowledge. Now they would become junior partners in a human-dominated galaxy. Relieved, he admitted finally. The burden of galactic governance was becoming too heavy for any single species to bear. Perhaps it is time for new perspectives. Elder, there is something I would like to discuss with you, Vasquez said, her tone becoming more formal. We would be honored if you would consider serving as an advisor to the Coalition. Your wisdom and experience would be invaluable as we work to build a better future for all species. You would trust former opponents with such responsibility? Elder, we have never considered any galactic species to be our opponents, Vasquez replied. You were simply following the path that seemed best for your people, just as we followed the path that seemed best for ours. Now we have the opportunity to walk that path together. Later that day, Vorthak found himself aboard New Geneva, a massive space station that had become humanity's unofficial capital for galactic affairs. The station itself was a marvel of engineering that combined human technology with design elements from dozens of species. It was beautiful in a way that the old council station had never been, but more than that, it was alive with activity and purpose. Representatives from hundreds of worlds moved through corridors filled with the sound of dozens of languages. Trade negotiations, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, and diplomatic meetings proceeded with an efficiency that the old council had never achieved. President Vasquez met him in her office, a surprisingly modest space that looked out on the bustling docks where ships from across the galaxy arrived and departed in constant streams. New Geneva processes more trade and diplomatic activity in a single day than the old council managed in a year, she noted, following his gaze to the busy space lanes outside. How do you maintain such efficiency? Vorthak asked. We eliminate unnecessary complexity, Vasquez replied simply. The old system required every decision to pass through multiple layers of bureaucracy. We have streamlined the process so that problems can be solved quickly and effectively. But surely you face the same political challenges that have always plagued galactic governance. Vasquez smiled. Elder, we learned something important during our long isolation. Most political problems are actually economic or social problems in disguise. Provide people with prosperity, security, and freedom, and most conflicts resolve themselves. And when they do not, then we address the underlying causes rather than treating the symptoms, she replied. It is remarkable how many seemingly intractable problems become manageable when you have the resources and technology to actually solve them. Through the office windows, Vorthak could see human ships departing for the galactic rim and beyond. These were not military vessels or even trade ships, but exploration fleets carrying the same careful, methodical approach that had served humanity so well in their expansion across known space. You are not content with the galaxy. You have already transformed, he observed. The galaxy was never our final goal, Vasquez confirmed. It was simply our first step. There are other galaxies beyond this one. Other civilizations that may need the alternatives we can provide. And if those civilizations resist your expansion, then we will wait, Vasquez replied calmly. We have become very good at waiting, Elder. Time is on our side. As Vorthak prepared to leave, he asked the question that had haunted him since humanity's emergence. President Vasquez, why did your people choose to remain hidden for so long? You clearly possessed the capability to expand centuries ago. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the ships carrying human flags toward distant stars. Because we learned from our previous emergence, she said finally. 65 million years ago, we expanded too quickly and created chaos instead of order. This time, we chose to wait until we understood the galaxy well enough to improve it rather than simply disrupting it. Your previous emergence, Vorthak repeated slowly. The ancient records speak of your defeat and withdrawal. Not defeat, Vasquez corrected gently. Negotiation. We realized we were not ready to take responsibility for galactic civilization, so we agreed to return to Earth and wait until we were mature enough to handle such responsibility. And now you believe you are ready? Now we know we are ready, she replied confidently. The transformation of the galaxy over the past 6 months has proceeded with minimal violence and maximum benefit for all involved species. That is not the result of chance, Elder. It is the result of careful planning and patient preparation as Vorthak departed New Geneva aboard a human transport ship that would deliver him to his homeworld in a fraction of the time the old routes required. He reflected on the ancient warnings that had been ignored. The Codex Universalis had not been written by the elder species of the galaxy. It had been written by humanity itself, a message left behind after their first emergence as a warning of what would happen when they returned. The universe had not decreed that humanity should remain asleep. Humanity had chosen to slumber until the galaxy was ready for the changes they would bring. And now, as human exploration fleets pushed beyond the galactic rim toward distant star clusters, Vorthak realized that the galaxy's awakening of humanity had not been the end of anything. It had been the beginning of everything. In the deep void between galaxies, ancient beacons began to activate in response to human expansion. Signals that had waited for millions of years suddenly came alive, sending messages toward distant galaxies where other civilizations watched and waited. The messages were simple, transmitted in mathematical languages that transcended species and time. The gardeners have awakened. Prepare for transformation. Across the cosmic web that connected all things, civilizations that had been isolated since the birth of stars began to stir. Humanity's expansion beyond their home galaxy would soon reach worlds that had been waiting patiently for this moment. Worlds populated by species that understood the true meaning of the ancient warnings. The galaxy had thought it was awakening humanity. Instead, it had given permission for humanity to awaken the universe itself. And in the depths of space where time moved differently and patience was measured in geological ages, other gardeners began to emerge from their own long slumbers, ready to join their human cousins in the great work of tending the cosmic garden that was their shared responsibility. The transformation was just beginning.